Where does that?
Erica's still, let me make sure she has everything she needs really quickly.
How about this?
Oh, sweet. I think this is hers.
Let me. Can I? We're going to start in 1 minute, so if you could find your seat, that would be great.
Yours or Erica's?
That's mine. Start with Cobble. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure, Ken. All right, we got to start. This is her coffee. Should I give it to her?
Sure.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. Right, feeling all the good positive energy in the space. Right, we're going to go ahead and start up so we can stick to this amazing action-packed schedule. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Before we start the session, we just wanted to recognize, we heard at the break that there are people watching from Kabul, Afghanistan right now as we speak, live streaming. Woo! So that's great news, great news. So welcome from Kabul, Afghanistan. We are so glad and grateful that you're tuning in with us right now. As you know, last September, Campaign Nonviolence organized over 250 demonstrations across the country in all 50 states, and many of you all were involved, against war, poverty, racism, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, and all forms of violence, and also calling for a new culture of peace and nonviolence. We're going to do it again next month, starting the week of September 20th. And as of today, we have over 150 demonstrations scheduled, which you can see on our website at campaignonviolence.org. This morning, we want to take some time to discuss what we're trying to do and how you can organize an action for September and help build this grassroots movement in the years to come. Right? Then we're going to break for lunch. First, though, we want to get a sense of who is in the room. I know we've greeted and connected, but we want to see who's in the room as far as who's around the country and also from other countries. So I want to hear from you all. So let's hear from everyone who are not from the U.S. that's in the room. Let me hear you. Let me hear you. Woo! All right. Okay, those who are from the South that's in the room, let's hear you. All right, all right. How about the Midwest? All right, wonderful, wonderful. Is the West Coast in the house? Wonderful. And here in the Rock Mountain time zone, who's in the space? All right, wonderful, wonderful. Let's have a round of applause for everyone who's here. Really powerful. Okay, all right, I was called out. I missed the Northeast. Let's hear the Northeast. All right. Wonderful. Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay. So thank you again for being here. And as I said, those who are watching online, live streaming, we're grateful that you're here. We want to thank you all for making this journey to Santa Fe, New Mexico, the journey to Los Alamos, and the journey of building a long-term movement for a culture of peace and nonviolence. To begin with, let's take a few minutes to reflect. We've heard some really powerful talks from Jim Lawson and Erica Chanowitz. Really powerful information that has been shared. Please turn to a neighbor, and if you haven't done so already, introduce yourself. And we're going to take just 3 minutes to not just introduce ourselves, but to reflect. What are you taking from these presentations? Right? Introduce yourself, but what are you taking from these presentations? 3 minutes. All right, 1 more minute to talk and reflect with your neighbor. 1 more minute. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. All right, I'm going to ask everyone to come back into the space so we can start back up. This is beautiful to see all the positive energy and relationships being built. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Okay. So thank you for reflecting on the power of nonviolence. All right, you all. I used to teach 6th grade, so I'm a raiser hander. Raise your hand if you hear me. Raise your hand. I teach young people nonviolence, so I'm all about raising hands if you hear me. All right, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so thank you for reflecting on the power of nonviolence. And this brings us to our second step, imagining how we can build, deepen, and broaden this movement for creative nonviolence. So right now, it's my pleasure to introduce the director of Bene Nonviolence Service, Dr. Ken Budigan, one of the nation's leading activists and strategists of nonviolence, who's also my friend. Let's give Dr. Ken Budigan a hand.
Isn't this great? Jim Lawson, Erica Chenoweth, Kit Evans Ford. Kit has been with Campaign Nonviolence from the beginning. She did the first video of Campaign Nonviolence. She's done a lot of phoning and outreach and organizing and training and speaking across the country. She's my friend and a great organizer. Let's have a round of applause for Kit Evans Ford. And she's here with her husband, Dwight, and her child, Imani, and they made the trip together, just like you made the trip, because we want a different kind of world. We want a world that works for everyone. My friend David Soleil says, I took this training from Bernard Lafayette, one of the great trainers in the civil rights movement, and I learned all about the beloved community. And he said, well, where do they meet? Where do we go hang out for coffee? And where's that beloved community? That's what we want to do. We want to tap our soul force. We want to tap our strategic power. We want to come together. We want to have that kind of diversity of participation that Professor Chenoweth talked about. And when we get together in 10 years and look back, when we are back in this room 10 years from now and we compare notes, we're going to see an amazing journey we've been on. And we'll all be beginning and deepening and broadening everything that we're going to look at and process together. So, when I was a baby activist, way back in the day, in the early 80s, I think that's the 1980s, I was learning about things about nonviolence and so on, but I wasn't really that involved. I got a letter in the mail from a man in Nicaragua, and I read it, and he was telling me things I already kind of had known. I had read Noam Chomsky, but at the bottom of the letter, after he described the carnage that my government was inflicting on his community, he said, "I'm telling you now, so 10 years from now, you cannot say you did not know. Do everything in your power to end this catastrophe." And I had a vision at that moment, a spontaneous vision of this man standing with a dying child in his arms. And my life has never been the same. And then I said, what can I do? And I'd heard about the fact that some people had come together, 50 people, and said if the U.S. invaded Nicaragua, they were going to proceed to the border and try to stop the invasion. If they couldn't do that, they were going to proceed to federal buildings and engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. I said, yes, count me in, I want to do that. But why not 500 people or 5,000 people or 5 million people? And out of that process, I wrote down a little thing that was a pledge to engage in nonviolent action if the U.S. escalated its military intervention. And later, Sojourners Magazine also had this idea, and we started working together, and eventually 100,000 people before the internet took this pledge of resistance, nonviolent resistance. And we organized all across this country, 400 local groups, hundreds of thousands of people. And we now know that that movement actually changed that policy. And there's a really great book by Christian Smith, another academic, University of Chicago Press, called Resisting Reagan, the Central America Peace Movement, that documents, just like Erica Chenoweth has documented, the impact and power of an ordinary grassroots movement doing extraordinary things. You're part of that movement. And for this time, this session, we're going to specifically focus on campaign nonviolence. We invite you to go deeply into this movement and possibility. We invite you to take action, to get that deep preparation that Reverend Lawson talked about last night, and to build strategically a movement that's saying we can have a culture of peace and nonviolence. It's not easy. It's not overnight. It's going to take a lot of us. It's going to take those 11 million people that Erica talked about. A culture of peace and nonviolence, free from war, poverty, climate crisis, and for good measure, we also said the epidemic of violence. And of course, that's the structural violence of racism, sexism, homophobia, economic injustice, and that violence we see at all levels. That we can go a different direction as a culture, as a world. We know we can do that. So, I'm going to invite you to turn to a neighbor. Turn to a neighbor and reflect on what's it going to take strategically to build an active, creative, powerful, nonviolent movement for change. We only have about 3 minutes, so you have to do this really quickly. Turn to a neighbor and do that, and then we're going to ask just a couple of people, in the interest of time, what are your ideas? So let's do that for about 3 minutes. Let's take one more minute. So if we could come back, thank your partner for her ideas or his ideas. I'd like to see if we could spend all month generating ideas. And yesterday, for those of you who were in the day-long training we did, we spent a lot of time looking strategically at how we can build a culture of peace and nonviolence. And we could spend a whole month doing that. I'm going to invite just a couple of insights. And Veronica has a microphone, and Sherry in the back has a microphone. And if somebody has an insight or a comment about how we build a culture of peace and nonviolence, we'll only take 2 or 3 of those. So.
I look at us, and we're mostly the silverbacks, here. And I live with a 35-year-old, and we have these conversations of where's the gap. And this kind of stuff doesn't move her. Her parents walked and sat and did stuff and became disillusioned and became yuppies and things. And I feel there is that in the age group and the generations. They're not really mobilizing. And then I look at a group like avaz.org, and they have 43 million members, and they can raise $1 million in a day, and they act. And I see the younger ones want that. Mm-hmm. They want fast, high-tech, impressive demonstrations that affect change. And somehow I see we're going to need to bridge between what we know and do and what appeals to them and how they want to see action happen.
Beautiful. Let's have a round of applause for that. Here's what I'd say as we hear these comments. These are like precious stones being dropped in the pond. Really hear them. How do we go forward and actualize that? Let's hear a couple more comments. We have...
What we came up with, we believe that it's going to take listening and education at all levels, beginning early, all the way up, and interfaith communication that involves the hospitality code of each religion that welcomes and says, what do you find beautiful in your religion? Here's what I find beautiful in my religion that we can offer to the nonviolence campaign, as opposed to starting with my religion is right, yours is wrong, and a willingness to risk the other.
Powerful. Let's have a round of applause. Let's have 1 or 2 other comments.
I have one simple idea that I think will change the world. Ready for this? Every culture has a narrative. Our culture has the wrong narrative. It's telling you that you are a separate physical being that requires despoliation of the environment to be happy, and so on and so forth. So if every one of us who is active would get in their head about 3 or 4 basic points about what the new story is, that we're body, mind, and spirit, that we're more satisfied by service than we are by competition and so forth, and just tell that story whenever we get a chance, which may not be very often. But I did this with my brother-in-law one time. I want to say, if it worked with Stanley, it will work with anybody.
Thank you.
So our website is metacenter.org, and we've got 5 points for you there.
By the way, this is Dr. Michael Nagler, one of the great authorities and academics and practitioners of nonviolence on the planet today. Thank you, Michael. Let's have one more comment. Metacenter.org. METTACENTER.org. AVAAZ.org. Yeah. Okay, so go ahead.
Hi, I've been thinking for a while that we're all at war with each other because we're trying to exclude, trying to separate ourselves from everybody else, separate ourselves from the universe, from our environment. So peace, I think, starts with inclusion. You know, if you feel like you're not included in a group, then have a sit-in for yourself. Include yourself and invite other people to include themselves into your own space, into your own group. And I guess maybe that's where it starts. Connection, trying to connect with people.
Beautiful. Let's have a round of applause. And let's have a round of applause for all these ideas said and unsaid. There's one other thing I'd like to add. As I mentioned, I was involved with many people in the Central America movement, been part of many movements since then. And Campaign Nonviolence isn't just trying to stop one war, it's trying to say war has to go. We're not just trying to say some poverty has to end, poverty has to go. We're not saying we just have to be a little better to the earth. Environmental destruction has to go. And I was just handed before our session started a comment that was sent with these amazing cranes. And this speaks to this, and I just want to add this piece. 70,000 cranes, a symbol of a longing for peace and nonviolence. And in San Quentin prison in California, they made these cranes. They made some of these cranes. And we honor everyone who made this possible, but we especially honor these people in San Quentin who made the cranes for this time, this weekend. And here's what one of the persons said. I have 28 more cranes to reach 1,000. And the 1,000, when you reach the 1,000, your wish comes true. Your wish comes true. It means we have 70 wishes from all across the planet longing for peace and nonviolence. I have 28 more cranes to reach 1,000. And my wish will be that our society refocuses its priorities, end mass incarceration, use the money to invest in our futures, use the money for a culture of peace and nonviolence.
Absolutely beautiful. Let me wipe my tears away here. Okay, so right now we have about 25 minutes left, but 15 of those minutes we want to talk about taking action for September as it relates to Campaign Nonviolence. Next month, people across the nation and in the world, actually, will take action as part of the Campaign Nonviolence Week of Nonviolent Actions for a Culture of Peace. Not only will these actions take place in all 50 states, CNV events will take place in Cameroon, Congo, Australia, France, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. We call on every person in this room and watching online to organize a Campaign Nonviolence action in their community, in your community, in September. We want to take a few minutes to give you a chance to share, envision, and even begin to plan your public action for Campaign Nonviolence. If you look in your packet, everyone should have gotten and received a handout that says 10 plus great action ideas. This really helpful handout here, 10 plus great action ideas. It has 20 actions listed here from marches and processions to standing with the movement for racial justice. So right now what we want to do is, and we have a lot of neighbor fellowship happening today, which is a beautiful thing, but we want you to turn to your neighbor. It can be the same neighbor or your neighbor next to you, behind you, or in front of you. And we're going to give you about 2 minutes for you to share what it is that you're planning. What action during the week of nonviolent actions are you planning, and what are you thinking about doing in regards to campaign nonviolence during the week of September? So you'll have 2 minutes to share, and then give your neighbor 2 minutes to share. Okay? All right, so go ahead. Also, in addition, once you finish sharing, everyone should have received this Campaign Nonviolence Week of Action slip on your seat. Does everybody see this here? All right, please take that out, and once you finish reflecting, please complete this, because there are going to be people going around with baskets. We have 150 actions registered for September, and we want to make sure that we have yours as well. So go ahead and reflect, and also make sure to complete this form here. Okay. That's so beautiful. Beautiful. We're doing okay on time? Got about 7 minutes. So we're taking 2 comments, right, during this session? 3? Right, we have about 2 more minutes. So if you haven't switched to the next person, go ahead and let your neighbor share. Okay, 1 more minute to wrap up what it is that you're saying. And also remember, once you're done, to fill out that action card here that we're going to take up. 1 more minute. I think it's important, though. Maybe you can do it. But after they reflect, and then they'll pick up. Okay. So let's give them 1 minute after we finish the people reporting out, and then they'll raise their hand, and then we'll transition to you. Okay. Okay. All right, wonderful. Raise your hand if you hear me. Raise your hand if you hear me. Raise your hand if you hear me. All right, wonderful, wonderful discussion. All right, so let's come back to the large group, and we have some time to hear a bit about what you're thinking about. All right, so raise your hand if you want to share what you're thinking about doing next month for your September Campaign Nonviolent Action, okay? All right, and leading off, we actually just Toby from New Mexico live streaming has offered, he sees that this is so important, such an important cause and action and movement that he is donating free live streaming to Albuquerque Action. So thank you, Toby. And he actually wants to speak. Go ahead, Toby.
So here's what I can offer. If one of you happens to plan, one or more of you happens to plan one of these events in September in Albuquerque, if you'll contact me, I'll live stream that event at no charge to you or the campaign. So wherever it is, we can usually stream from any place via cellular, so you can even have an outdoor event. And I've got real good coverage in Albuquerque, so as long as you're in Albuquerque, we'll do the streaming for you and get that online.
Give him a hand. Thank you, Toby, for that.
So let me give you my phone number. Get ready to write it down if you're from Albuquerque. It's 505 315 2897. My first name is Toby. My last name is Eunice, Younis.
Okay, thank you, Toby.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. Also, if you didn't receive that information, you can always go to the registration table, and the CMB team will make sure that you get Toby's information. Okay, so we have time for about 2 or 3 comments. I see someone over here. Oh, actually, we have a action that you're speaking about and are planning for September.
The Peace and Justice Center, which is a statewide organization in Vermont, participated last year, and we're participating again with a 2-day training, well, it's 2 evenings, called Activism 101 on Nonviolence.
Powerful. Thank you for sharing.
I wanted to share the action that I'm considering because I don't have a lot of time to organize a big event. And so maybe some of you will take inspiration. I am thinking about walking up and down the main streets of Santa Fe, dragging tumbleweed and being covered by tumbleweed as kind of a performance. I may invite other people to join me, but to awaken people to the climate crisis that we are facing in the Southwest. Very simple, doesn't take much time. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Really creative actions.
Hi, I'm Jun Hamamoto from Berkeley, California, and we're bringing East Point Peace Academy to San Quentin Prison for a 7-week Kingian nonviolence training brought to us by our Dharma brother, Kazuhaga.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful.
For a little over a decade, the Gandhi Alliance for Peace in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is a state organization, sponsors an annual birthday party for Gandhi. We try to do it as close to his actual October birthday as we can. This year it falls within the week. We will also be naming a Utah Peacemaker of the Year, which is done every year. And this has been going on before we heard of Campaign Nonviolence, but John Deere said we could wrap it up with, we could just enfold ourselves in Campaign Nonviolence, and so that's what we'll do.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. All right, we'll take a couple more. And I know there are a few people in the back, if we can get a microphone over there as well.
Hi. We do a youth event. It just happens to be on September 20th, and our theme is Scripture Alive, Encounter, Pray, Live the Word. And one of our sub-things for our project is Heal the Sick. So we're going to get one of our people from our small group in Connecticut to do a workshop for our young people to make the cranes, but also to make larger the whole Heal the Sick, because everything up there that we're trying to end is pretty sick.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Okay, we have action coming in from the live streaming. Rivera?
So this is very exciting. I'm Rivera's son. I'm the social media coordinator, but I wanted to share an action that came in from Diane Moore, who didn't know this was happening in September, but is so inspired that she wrote to say that she is with the Agape International Spiritual Center with Reverend Michael Beckwith. and they have their sacred service Saturday in September, and they are thinking about feeding homeless and planting trees. This is the power of live stream, so thank you all for supporting us in getting the word out via this modern technology. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Diane. We're so glad to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Rivera. Okay, we'll take one more from this side here.
Okay, so we've talked a lot this weekend about, trying to bring in a more diverse crowd as well as a younger generation crowd for nonviolence. And the best outlet that we have is that we're in a university town. So we have the option to use our campus as a grounds to bring this Peace Coalition, further for diversity as well as younger generations. So in September, we're hoping to go on one of our public zones on our campus and have sort of like a rally or a more visible demonstration to just show that this is out there and that, here I am, a grad student, and I have the time to do this, so they should have the time to do it as well, because it's very important. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. What university are you located, and what town are you in, or city?
Southern Illinois University. Salukis.
Wonderful.
Carbondale, Illinois.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, thanks for sharing. Did anyone else on this side want to share before we transition? All right, go ahead.
So, hi, I'm Monica from Memphis. We're planning a vigil on Sunday, September 20th at the National Civil Rights Museum, where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And then the following weekend, we're standing in solidarity with the Fraser community for the Fraser Black Party of Peace, which is one of the poorest zip codes in the country. So it's an occasion of celebration and empowerment. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause. Round of applause for all the nonviolent actions planned for September. Okay, one thing I want us to do now, everyone should have had one of these action cards on their seat. I want us to take just a minute or two to go ahead and fill out this action card. If you have something planned for September, if you're thinking about it and you're brainstorming, still fill out one of these cards. And we're gonna have our amazing volunteers taking these up in baskets right now. So go ahead, we're gonna take 2 minutes to fill this out and complete it.
And you don't have to have details yet. You don't have to have it fully formed, but making a commitment to make one of those actions possible in September.
Okay, so we'll take about 1 more minute to go ahead and finish that. Thank you so much. These are so important, such important work. Did everyone have a form? You need one? Okay. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so right now, the baskets will continue to go around, but we're gonna go ahead and transition to hearing Ken speak about Campaign Nonviolence and next steps with Campaign Nonviolence.
Again, let's have a round of applause for all the actions that are being planned in September. We're immersed in campaign violence. We're immersed in campaign violence. And we're creating a campaign that says everyone matters, the world matters, the earth matters, everyone matters. And as we learned last night in those advanced studies from Reverend Lawson, that we have to do that with preparation. We have to do that with strategy. We have to think, how do we find people in our communities that we don't ordinarily sit down with and organize with and find each other and have that potluck and then have that day of relationship building and then have that day where you begin to actually see how all of these efforts connect. And we're so excited that we're all here looking at how we can make that possible. Campaign Nonviolence is off and running now. We've established the groundwork for a long-term movement for a culture of peace and nonviolence, and we'll be taking this next step next September, next month, during the Week of Actions. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we do after that. What are next steps beyond that? We launched this campaign last year with over 250 actions in all 50 states and other parts of the world. We're going to continue that next month. But there are what we call 4 steps to change the world. And we'd like to share those with you and really allow those to filter in and say, what can I do? What can I do to make this change possible? First, mainstreaming nonviolence. It was so wonderful that Reverend Lawson skeptically said, yeah, well, I don't know, good luck with that. But if you were listening, he also said, it must happen. It must happen. We must make this not a utopia that everything becomes a utopian or idealistic society. No, mainstreaming nonviolence is everyone gets the tools to deal with the situations in this life, the situations our society is facing. Everyone gets those tools. We need nonviolent literacy. Just like in the 19th century, a lot of places in this country and around the world decided everyone was going to read. It was, before that, it was mostly white, privileged men who read. That shifted. And it doesn't mean we have perfect comprehension or perfect literacy, but that campaign got rolling. And now lots of us read. The same thing with nonviolence. Active, creative, challenging, audacious nonviolence. And one of the ways over the next 2 years we're going to help mainstream nonviolence is we're working with Peter Burgell and David Soleil and some other people to audaciously envision the 1,000 training project. We want to see in the next year, in the next 2 years, 1,000 trainings in this country, all over the country, in active, creative, challenging nonviolence like what we've been seeing this weekend. Can we bring the insights of Erica Chenoweth and James Lawson to every part of this country? You can be part of that. I would invite you to resolve to host and help organize a training in your community, to take the wisdom and resources that we've been sharing this weekend into your community to help us get to those 11 million people who are going to be part of an unstoppable movement that says we're going to go another direction from war, poverty, climate crisis. We're going to go toward a world where everyone matters. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen with relentless persistence. And training, that deep preparation that Reverend Lawson talked about, is key to that. I'd like to just take a moment and invite you to actually think about that. Can you envision in the next year a nonviolence training in your community? And if you're interested in that, there are actually some flyers in the back and a box where you can actually sign and say, yeah, I'm going to do that. And Peter Burgell from Oregon and David Soleil from Atlanta are helping with Campaign Nonviolence. They're very interested in making that move forward. The second stage, besides mainstreaming nonviolence, is building a movement of movements. We've heard relentlessly in the last day here that the problem is we're separated and isolated. We need to be together. We need to come together. Building a movement of movements means growing an inclusive movement that joins the many issues and organizations to generate the immense people power necessary for significant and enduring change. In 2016 and 2017, we invite you, every one of us, to sit down with organizers in communities that in your community that you normally don't work with, to build trust, to connect, to listen to what their concerns are, and to unleash people power together for concrete change. Campaign Nonviolence organizer and social media wizard Rivera's son is planning to organize workshops in 2016 to support this alliance building entitled Collaborative Strategies for a Movement of Movements. So think about bringing Rivera to your community to help strategize how we do that. And maybe that's also an opportunity for people to come together. The third stage, besides mainstreaming nonviolence and building a culture of peace, is fostering a culture of peace and nonviolence locally. One of the ways we're encouraging that in the next 2 years is what we're calling the Nonviolent Cities and Spaces Project. And we were inspired by Nonviolent Carbondale. Nonviolent Carbondale, they said, we're going to create a city that's nonviolent. And they call that Nonviolent Carbondale. What about nonviolent Los Angeles and nonviolent Tallahassee and nonviolent Santa Fe and nonviolent Chicago, where I'm from? What would it take to create a nonviolent city? It's not easy. We did a practice or an exercise yesterday in the training, and we spent a couple of hours actually trying to dramatize and embody and activate that. I invite you to go back to your community and say, as audacious and strange as it sounds, what would it mean, nonviolent New York or nonviolent Kabul? How do we get there? We're going to encourage you to use that as a platform for working with lots of different movements and lots of different people. What would it take to get a resolution by your city council that says every decision of this city has to be made in light of nonviolent principles, from police practices to housing practices to how we tax each other or how we're democratic together? And finally, in addition to mainstreaming nonviolence, building a movement of movements, fostering a culture of peace and nonviolence locally, actually building out that culture of peace and nonviolence, is action, taking action. We'll continue to take action. So next year, September 18th through the 25th, 2016, will be our third annual week of nonviolent actions all across this country and increasingly across the world. Begin planning for that now. We're looking forward to helping to bring all these strands together at that point. We want to throw in a couple of ideas that we're percolating on in addition to that week of actions. The first is, we think it's time in this country to have a nonviolent emergency response network so that when Ferguson happens, when Baltimore happens, when any action of violence and injustice is taking place across this country, we don't just scramble and respond. We've actually built a network. And I talked about the Pledge of Resistance at the top of this session. That's what we did. We built an emergency response network. We responded to so many escalations of military action in Central America by our government. And that was one of the powers of it. But that's not possible without training and organizing and connecting. So we encourage you to begin mulling on that idea. How could we build an emergency response network? What kinds of trainings would have to happen? What kind of organizing? And finally, this is an idea we've been kind of percolating on for a couple of years, and we don't know when we can actually move toward this, but I want to plant this seed. New York City, November 26, 2012. No violent crime was reported in the whole 5 boroughs of New York City. It caught the police totally off guard. It caught the mayor totally off guard. You had a city that for one day was a day without that level of violence. There are other forms of violence, but that level of violence. When we heard that at Campaign Nonviolence, we said, could we imagine moving to actually declaring at some time in the future, in the next year or 2 or 5 or whatever, a day without violence and a day for active and creative nonviolence? What would it take to organize in your community a day without violence? It would cause a huge amount of discussion about what is violence? What scope are we talking about? Who would have to come together from the city to institutions to all the people who have been working for peace and nonviolence, all the people who have been the victims of violence and survivors of violence? All kinds of things could happen. And what if we did that globally? What if we did that in 5 years globally? We actually said we're going to create this, not because we want violence the rest 364 days, the other 364 days of the year, but as a proof to ourselves what Erica Chenoweth is saying. We can live a nonviolent life in a nonviolent planet, in a nonviolent world. And we could learn something. It would be a great training for us for this process. I want to thank all of you for being here this weekend. I want to thank all of you for building Campaign Nonviolence, connecting these dots, mainstreaming nonviolence, taking action, and having the audacity to believe we can live in a world of peace and nonviolence where everyone matters.
Really powerful. Thank you, Ken. Woo! Woo, woo! Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. All right. So right now we are going to transition into lunch, and John Deere is going to come up and share with us.
Ken Buddigan and Kid Evans Ford. Thank you both so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So now we have our great lunch break. You've got an hour and a half. We're going to start again at 1:30, but if you can give me a minute, I want to try to explain what we're going to do for lunch. And a lot of you were here yesterday, so you know this. You can help those who weren't here. So as I told you, and it's all in your program, the Hilton does not allow food. So we planned and planned and planned, and we've got a nice bag lunch, vegetarian lunch, and bottle of water for everyone. And you should all have a ticket. And it's outside at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. We've got it's all set up right now. People are waiting. So you can follow me, and there'll be people guiding us. We're going to walk out the front door of the Hilton. We're going to walk all the way around the Hilton, along the parking lot, to the corner of Guadalupe Street and Alameda. And you'll see the church on the other side diagonally. And there's a big statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe. That's where we have Ryan and the volunteers with food and water for everybody. Invite you to take that. There's a park across the street from that. You can sit on the lawn. There's some picnic tables. You might want to walk to the plaza. If you're nearby, we invite you to go back. We are prepared to recycle everything. And you can go back and return things to the Guadalupe statue. You might want to visit the church, which is open for us. I thank you for supporting our Pace Bene resources and books. We'll be having them for sale all this break. You please stop by and get them. We have incredible panels coming up when we get back at 1:30. Be here promptly at 1:30, and we'll be back for more. Thank you all so very much. Let's leave right this minute for lunch, and I'll see you over at the statue.